Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Opposite the Monitor, and today we're going to get into some Cyberpunk news, and they're starting to make a live-action Cyberpunk 2077 project, which is dope. Just wanted to say, man, was out last week, man, had a, going through a little kind of sickness spell or whatever like that, whatever it was making me nauseous or whatever, but I'm back, and we're back making content now, and yeah, man, CD Projekt Red is announcing a new live-action Cyberpunk 2077 project, man, and that is good news, especially coming off the heels of Phantom Liberty and stuff. But I mean, as far as we've seen with, information or just with them doing Cyberpunk Edge Runners, man, and having that type of anime style, I mean, like, man, I wish, we could get more seasons out of that. But the particular animation company that works on that, they typically only just make one season projects. They typically do just one-offs essentially. But yeah, man, they go on they go on to say in IGN that announced today the unnamed project is a collaboration between CD Projekt Red and Anonymous Content, the production company behind True Detective and Mr. Robot, as well as Academy Award winning films including The Revenant and Spotlight. I'm not familiar with Spotlight, but I am familiar with the other three. I mean, just because it's the production company, that doesn't necessarily mean the talent in which they hire to work on this live action is going to be good. But that's a good track record, man. True Detective is great, depending on what season you particularly like, I guess. And then Mr. Robot, one of my favorite TV shows. And then The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio and the whole iconic bear type of scenario that happened in that. Great. So I mean, like, yeah, this seems like it's, they got the right type of mindset with it. I do hope they make it like dark. You know what I'm saying? Like, not necessarily dark, of course you want some like funny undertones, I guess. But I mean, like, it is cyberpunk, and there is a very much so serious tone to the game. So I want to kind of like, I would just want them to like translate that over into the live action. What's going to make or break this too is like, depending on who they choose to be in the actual live action series, is like the actors they choose, will definitely depend on like, not necessarily make or break it, but more so just like the writers, the director, the type of tone they're going for, stuff like that, as well as the actors they choose to portray specific characters. And it's probably depending on like the timeline too, if it's centered more around like the timeline of the video games, you may see, cameos from like Idris Elba or whatever like that. Or if you're going back like further, like in the earlier time of Cyberpunk, you may have some cameos from like Keanu Reeves, which would be pretty dope. So I mean, but yeah, they go on to say that CD Projekt Red said this project is at an early development stage and the hunt is on for screenwriter to tell a brand new story set in the world of Cyberpunk 2077. So, I mean, yeah, it'll be a brand new story. But I mean, it'd be nice to kind of get like some appearances from other characters from different shows. There's Cyberpunk Edge Runners right here. So, I mean, like, just depending upon like what particular time in the universe they want to choose and stuff, that would be pretty dope. And you can kind of get like cameos from other well-known characters that are in the series. But yeah, man, this is good information. Good. Moving on, we got some information. Resident Evil 9 will put Chris Redfield back in the starring role, says Insider. So take this with a grain of salt. I particularly don't like, talking about rumors, like I've always said on this channel, but I do like the fact that it gives me the opportunity to kind of like, express my expectations, I guess, with it. But they go on to say that according to supposed insider, Marks Chris, Resident Evil 9 is on the way and is going to be putting Chris Redfield back in the driver's seat. Yeah, long time coming, man. Like, I've been waiting to kind of see older Chris Redfield, like, at the helm, and I also want to kind of see like what else has been going on with the other characters, or if some of the other characters died off and we don't know about it. I would definitely like to kind of know, and if one of them does happen to be dead, what I'm saying, let's get a prequel game about that centered around that, or some DLC centered around that. That would be pretty dope. There's, they've already kind of shown new ways to kind of explore this world and stuff. Resident Evil is one of my favorite like games of all time. Which is like the games, some of the movies, not all of the movies. You know, like the latest movie they did, not the animated movie, but the latest live action was very much so very close to the actual source material, just didn't have a budget. But all of the animated movies have been great. But they go on to say that Resident Evil 9 will primarily revolve around the character of Chris Redfield with the potential inclusion of other classic characters in the narrative. However, it is, well, according to Mark's Chris, however, it is my belief that the story arc involving Ethan Winters has concluded, or at least temporarily reached its conclusion. Ethan Winters is dead now, like all the way dead. Like he died in Resident Evil 7, which you find out later, which you find out in Resident Evil 8. But, he essentially was very much so, like he very much so died like actual death, I guess, in Resident Evil 8 Village. And, the DLC with his daughter is actually pretty interesting too. I kind of don't want them to kind of go further with that character though. Like, Ethan wanted his daughter to be normal and just have like a normal life and stuff, which, Chris is, involved in her or whatever like that. So you may actually see her pop up in Resident Evil 9, whenever they make it, because it's coming regardless. Resident Evil is very much so a moneymaker for Capcom. And, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Ethan Winters' daughter as like cameoed in the story or something like that of that nature. But yeah, I think it's time to kind of bring the main characters back into the fold. Yes, we've gotten them with the remakes. That was nice. That's nice to kind of get like a rendition of those characters and stuff like that. But I kind of, in the mainline series, I kind of just want to see what my original cast has been up to. So yeah, man, I'm ready to kind of see them back into the fold. Classic characters such as Claire, Jill, Leon, and Chris will return in the upcoming Resident Evil game. Players will also have the chance to play as other characters in certain missions. The game is expected to focus less on horror and more action. I mean, yeah, this is kind of the same issue they ran into before with Resident Evil 5. I don't like that part about the having the chance to play as other characters in certain missions. That sounds very much so like Resident Evil 6, and where you play the 3 different characters, 3 different storylines, and all the storylines interconnect. I don't like that formula. I don't think you need to do that. What I think should probably take place is that you tell a singular story, and then you don't, it sounds very much so restricted, but I don't think you should give the player the choice to choose which character to follow down the plot or the story. Like, tell the story up until a specific point with a specific character, and then now that you're still the story is still unfolding, but we're now transitioning to playing a different character. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't think all of the characters, I don't think you need to just play as all of the characters. You know what I'm saying? Like, kind of like a TV show in which you have 2 protagonists, maybe 3 protagonists, and the story is being told, but you're just jumping to different characters, and they kind of have their own mini side quests, but they still are within the main overarching plot type of thing. Like, go down that route. Because I mean, there's a video game that offers a lot of hours, so it allows you to be able to kind of do it that way versus, like, I understand the whole replayability thing, but like Resident Evil, you kind of just want to be more story focused. Replayability kind of comes into play with the DLC add-ons or whatever, or with the, like the way that they did Resident Evil Village, where they added a different, for like a different perspective on the first person, third person type, or second person over the shoulder type of thing. Like, adding those very much so, like, small things like that, which I mean, he goes on to kind of mention too as well. But I don't think you need to go down. I don't think you need to touch Resident Evil 6 over again. Don't do that. I don't like Resident Evil 6 was very much so the weakest game out of all the games, in my opinion, and doesn't necessarily need to be like redone. That game needs as a matter of fact, leave Resident Evil 6 alone. Like, when you do remakes for Resident Evil 5 and stuff like that, cut it there. Don't do Resident Evil 6 remake, or if you do Resident Evil 6 remake, fix that issue. because that just, it didn't work. It didn't work. And it just took the game to like a weird place, essentially. Now the whole issue with like the focus less on horror and more on action, the way in which they've kind of developed Chris Redfield now, it's like, it's inevitable to kind of like make it more of a horror with Chris Redfield. They kind of did it a little bit with Resident Evil like 8 DLC, or like, the last part in Resident Evil 8, and then like the Resident Evil 7 DLC a little bit. There was a little horror aspect to it, but it's very much so difficult to do that with Chris Redfield when he's armed to the teeth and extremely strong as hell. So it's like, it's kind of difficult to do that with that particular character anymore. Given the fact that Chris, the type of Chris Redfield we had in the first game, you could do that because that was the first iteration. That's kind of how that game kind of played out and stuff. But ever since the games have just started releasing, Leon has taken more of that horror aspect of it because he's very much so not like as militarized as Chris is at this point. And that's just where they've kind of written Chris into. So I've just kind of like accepted the fact that it's very much so difficult to put Chris Redfield in a more horror type of setting because you'd have to almost nerf Chris Redfield. You'd have to nerf Chris Redfield, which some people may think that that's a good thing to do. I mean, nerfing him and making him a little bit more realistic, I guess, would probably work, but the only way you can make the horror work for me in particular is to nerf Chris Redfield and make him more on the type of level as Leon per se. Because I mean, Chris Redfield at this point is just a tank. Like it's just difficult to do that at this point. So he goes on to say, it will still be a horror game. The camera mode is yet to be confirmed, but there's a possibility that players may have the option to choose between third person and first person perspectives. I expect it to release later in 2024. Capcom should start talking this year. I mean, yeah, man, that'd be great. Giving people play a choice, bro. Like instead of just adding that in as like an additional type of thing after the game is released or whatever like that, give it up front. Do first and third person perspectives. Then that way people can just have a choice and stuff, because you can kind of get like the old school style of Resident Evil, like Resident Evil 5, where you can actually see Chris Redfield, the iconic gun holding stance and stuff like that. People can get that, or you can just do first person view, and keep it more modern like that. So I mean, it's a benefit. It's a benefit to both, I guess. They also go on to say that, or the insider also goes on to say that they'll be possibly doing Code Veronica after Resident Evil 5 remake. So I mean, people have been asking for Code Veronica as well, which I mean they should do. They should do a Code Veronica remake. But I'm excited for this, man. Glad they're able to kind of go back to their roots with this and kind of come full circle. That's what it needs to do. It needs to come full circle, because the first game started with Chris Redfield, and then just bring it back to Chris Redfield again in a different time, in a more modernized time. And I like the new Chris Redfield, because the new Chris Redfield is very much so a dark kind of, like, he's more serious and more so grittier. He's like, young Chris Redfield is very much so a hero type of thing, and this new modernized Chris Redfield, like this new more experienced old man Chris Redfield, is very much so like, yes, I have to save a bunch of people and stuff like that, but it's going to come at a greater cost. Like I'm willing to sacrifice people to be able to accomplish my objective and my mission. So I mean, I like that. I'm, down with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it is very much so, a good direction to go with Chris Redfield. But moving on, though, we got some information. Fable creator releases free RPG because everyone is poor and stressed. Man, you know what? When I first saw this, I was like, you know what, man? Like, that is actually, like, very much so, to be like extremely honest, given the fact that like inflation is going out of control and stuff like that. People are having less savings and stuff like that. Like, and then we're also going into like, this whole thing of greedflation and stuff. It's just like very much so, a lot of pressure on people's, wallets these days. But, the co-creator of Fable and developer of Dungeon Keeper has added a brand new Ultima-inspired roguelike RPG to Steam, and it's completely free. Danae Carter is the brains behind the new project. It's a dark fantasy turn-based retro fusion of classic turn-based RPGs and roguelites. Just a kind of little like synopsis of this, or like the story, I guess, to kind of like, set the kind of give you an idea of what the game is about. Moon Ring, set 500 years in the land of Caldera, which was once shrouded in endless darkness. 5 moons appeared in the sky and brought light back to the world, as well as some strange gods. With them, they brought dreams, which would bestow supernatural gifts to devotion. Now Caldera is a land of devotion and dreamers run by the Archon, the god's representative. However, unlike their gods, the Archon is not immortal and a successor must be found. You take on the role of a dreamer who is free to choose your own destiny, even if that means becoming the next Archon. So yeah, the game is called Moon Ring. They kind of give also like some Steam synopsis too of like, what you can do, which is travel, trade, sneak, fight, stuff like that. But I actually like the reasoning in which this particular developer wanted to release this, which was actually very much so interesting. Carter's reasoning behind creating the game was to bring the spotlight back to video games in this genre. This is my love letter to a style of gaming that has largely fallen out of fashion, he explains. The days I spent playing these games were spent in joyful exploration and discovery, venturing into the dark unknown. A co-author of the experience, filling in the gaps left by the primitive art with my imagination. For those of you who did the same, I hope Moon Ring recaptures some of the spirit of those days for you. For those who did not, I hope that more modern conveniences you find in this game allow you to catch a glimpse of what we did 40 years ago. Which that's dope, man. Like, I actually like that sentiment. I actually, that's actually a really nice sentiment to kind of have with this, man. Is a kind of like, I love like bringing like older style games back with a more modern influence too as well. But it kind of gives, new gamers like an opportunity to be able to kind of like, explore, what games used to be, man. Like you get a full product and stuff like that up front, not this whole microtransaction breaking it down into battle passes and all this other shit. Like you got the full game up front. So, and I actually like this little last piece. This is probably the funniest part about this. He basically going on to say that life is hard. COVID sucked. Everyone's poor and stressed, and I don't need the $300 this would make me. I'd rather take the goodwill. God damn, he dropping gems. He dropping bars, goddamn. So I mean, like, yeah, man, that's actually really dope. I actually like that. Definitely go check out Moon Ring on Steam, man. It's free. Play it. I actually am going to kind of download this and check it out after this video. So yeah, man, definitely go check Moon Ring out for sure. But yeah, moving on. We got some more information. Third Star Wars Jedi game is in the works. Confirms Cal Kestis actor Cameron. I think his name is Cameron Monaghan. So yeah, apparently he was at Ocala Comic-Con, and they had a Q&A, and one of the fans asked about current projects that he's working on, and he specifically said that we, specifically meaning Respawn, are working on the third game, and we are currently in the process of doing it right now, which I mean is to be expected. Both the first game and the sequel were successes, so I mean it's only right that you make a third game as well. Plus, I mean, this is probably some of the best Star Wars that we've gotten in a long time. Like I don't like. I mean, even with some of the movies are terrible. The TV shows I've just given up watching the TV shows. This is probably some of the best like Star Wars story that you're probably gonna find at this moment. And I mean, this is good. This is good news, man. I definitely like him. I hope Cameron Monaghan can actually spin off some of these games and like bring them into like a TV show or movie, and we can kind of like explore more about this particular character, man. But I like this game. I think this is good news. I'm glad, he's able to kind of like continue this particular character. Cause I do like Cal Kestis. And yeah, man, this is good news, man. This is some of the best, like I said, Star Wars story that we've probably gotten in a long time. And it's great. So yeah, that's good news, man. We're getting the third Star Wars, which I mean is to be expected. But moving on, we got some information. Max Payne remake to merge first two games as one release. This is very much so interesting. Because these seem to be full-fledged remakes, and putting them into one game would actually be pretty dope. Not remasters, remakes. So they go on to say, following the first game, Remedy Entertainment sold the IP to Rockstar Games after going through a difficult phase. However, Rockstar Games and Remedy Entertainment signed an agreement for 2 remakes last year. They go on to say that the remakes mark Remedy Entertainment's long-awaited return to Max Payne, with the studio aiming to combine them into a single release. This is actually very much so interesting because that means this could probably be like a 2-disc type of thing. You know, there's a lot of story with Max Payne. And if you're putting both the first and the second game into one game, that's gonna be a big ass game. That's gonna be a very much so big game, long game. I think what could actually end up happening though is that I wouldn't actually mind seeing this broken down into like how Final Fantasy VII Remake is, where they break it in like do like episodically, you know. And kind of like expand the first game. But I mean, putting both of these games into putting the first and the second game into one game actually could be pretty dope. You know, because that means like, you know, there'll be a time jump in there. You know, you can kind of explore. They're probably gonna make it more open world, I guess, than what the originals were. Very much so. I'm interested to see what they would be changing outside of just combining them into a single release. So they go on to say that so Sam Lake confirmed that the studio is dedicated to this IP, claiming that this was a massive undertaking for the entire team. He went on to say, just thinking about bringing them up to modern standards and combining them into one, you can see that it's a big project. So I mean, yeah, like, you know, just depends on what you mean by modern standards. Like, you know, we've heard the word remake from, you know, Rockstar before, and it's just like, it's like a remaster, bruh. You know, so I mean, like, you know, bringing them a modern standards could mean any damn thing. It could mean, you know, changing up the controller scheme to fit a PS5, you know, so to fit an Xbox Series X and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, what do you truly mean? You know, you know, like I'm very much so going on the bounds of like what an actual remake is, which is building the same game from the ground up. So they go on to say the studio intends to release both remakes simultaneously as one package, providing more value for buyers. I mean, yo, that would be dope. If they're 2 completely remade games from the ground up, that could actually be pretty dope. And you get like a 2-disc type of thing. I mean, shit, I wouldn't mind paying. I pay $100 for that. I pay $100 for that to be a like complete like overhaul of it. You know, get some different skins for Max Payne and stuff like that within it, some collectible items, make it like not like an anniversary. I mean, you could do like an anniversary edition, I guess. You know, make it very much so like an event. You know, yeah, I would definitely be on board with this. For sure. But yeah, man, this is exciting though. Like, I mean, a whole like a 2-disc type of thing, that'd be pretty dope. I think that'd be pretty awesome. But moving on, we got some more information. FarCry 7 set to revolutionize franchise with new features and urgent storyline. So this is the first time I've kind of come across like FarCry 7. But what this sounds like very much so sounds so fucking far beyond like what they have done before in the past. So to go on, they say Ubisoft Montreal is gearing up to launch an ambitious new installment in the acclaimed Far Cry series, tentatively scheduled for fall 2025. Far Cry 7, internally known as Project Blackbird, promises to bring groundbreaking changes to both its storyline and gameplay mechanics. I don't know how many times I've heard that, but when I read further into this, I'm like, okay, they're actually making it sound interesting. So firstly, the team is making a significant change by ditching the Dunia engine in favor of the more advanced Snowdrop engine. Man, every time I've seen people change engines that were specifically meant for a different game, it doesn't pan out well. I'd rather you just make a new engine specifically for this game. I'm pretty sure Snowdrop is used with the Division, if I'm not mistaken. Or that could be a different engine. But I do know they use Snowdrop engine in a completely different game of Ubisoft's. And That's one of the bad things I see with this is that, like I keep saying before, man, you using engines that were specifically built for a certain game and trying to translate that over to a different game, and then that's when you run into optimization issues and all this other stuff like that when it actually releases. I've seen that with Battlefield before. I've seen that with like I've seen. I think Call of Duty may have done that one. Not Call of Duty. Well, it was a different. I can't remember. It was another game that done that. But I've seen Battlefield do that before, where they switched engines to a different game, and it didn't like it was just not meant for that. That's not what it was meant for. Same thing I kind of mentioned with like playground games and the development studio behind it. It's like, or even just like Redfall, where it's just like they're not equipped to do multiplayer, so why even do that? You gotta have the right tools in place to be able to create a specific type of, experience. But they go on to say that the main storyline for Far Cry 7 is already causing a stir with its emotionally charged, non-linear plot. I mean, I don't know why, like it's always been non-linear. You can legit like finish the game within 5 minutes of starting it, a lot of the times. But this one seems very much so different, which is what I like. So it says that players will have the challenging task of rescuing their kidnapped family from a nefarious group known as the Sons of Truth. The freedom to choose the sequence in which to save each family member offers a unique personalized gameplay experience that's bound to increase the game's replay value. I like that. It kind of, it gets even better too. So I'll just read the rest of it. Adding a sense of urgency, the game developers have integrated a real-time countdown clock currently designed to run for 24 actual hours. So the game takes place within a day, like actual real life day. That's dope. The feature can be paused when players take refuge in one of their safe houses, adding a strategic layer to the gameplay. Okay. The concept of an alterable storyline is taken a step further in Far Cry 7, though. Family members can actually die, leading to different narrative outcomes and making each choice in the game all the more crucial. That's dope. Given that like there's a very much so consequence element to it, and then the only way that I can see this work is if the setup, if the story, the setup actually fleshes out each family member, and you can kind of get an idea of who do you need to choose to be able to save. Or because I very much so feel like this is kind of dope, because it's like you probably won't be you probably could save everyone, but it's probably not designed for you to save everyone. It's a possibility, but it being probable may be very slim to none, which is, I like that aspect of it, because it's more so like, okay, you have to make tough decisions on who to save. Like, are you going to save your dad? Are you going to save your mom? You going to save your sisters? You going to save your brother? You know what I'm saying? Like, and then like maybe some flashbacks and stuff, you can get more information. It's like, okay, like, should I actually say my brother's kind of an asshole? You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's like, he's done a lot of assholey shit in his past to me, and and like, can I influence my decision on how I want to save him and stuff? Or, it's like, it just solely depends on the character development and the attachment you have to each family member. I think that's actually a dope concept. They also go on to say, which is another standout point that I actually like when I read this too. I was like, man, this is also interesting. Another standout feature includes a new interrogation mechanic, which I don't think that interrogating is not necessarily like a new thing. You can interrogate people in the older Far Cry games. They kind of already had that, but it was just, I guess it's not like as robust or like more detailed as this one may be. But they say in this gameplay element, players will have the option to interrogate NPCs for crucial information. However, this information might not always be reliable, as NPCs have the option to lie or even escape. Oh, damn. So, like this actually throws in, like, if they're able to pull this off, if Ubisoft is able to pull this off, this could actually be very much so interesting Far Cry game. I hope they don't call it Far Cry 7. Call it something else. That's just that 7 is a lot. Don't call it that. But like, this is very much so interesting. I actually like this. It's it gives a very much so, strategical way to play the game, as well as difficult decision making. you know, and it also gives more so just like, I feel like it can actually kind of make you more invested too. Because that's one thing about Far Cry, like the story has been very much so bland for the last few games. Like the gameplay has been solid. You know, of course, it's that same like Ubisoft formula where it's like you just go from one, you know, camp to the next, clear out the camp, get your reward, bring in new people, you take it over, now it's a safe house. Like, I kind of, you know, don't want them to kind of go through that, but, you know, that can very much so be, you know, pretty dope. And then here's the other thing too, is like, so the time element, it depends on me per se, because it's like, I mean, 24 hours, I mean, is a normal size game in the story element side of things, but like, I don't know how that, if it's going to be based like on a clock, there can't be complete freedom in the game then. There can't be complete freedom, and the map can't be extremely massive, because you have to factor in the time it takes to go from one location to the next, you know? And it's so like, you know, and it's based on actual real time hours. So it's like, that's very interesting to see how that translates into the game, and to like the being able to go to location unless they, I mean, well, fast travel is an option, so you can add in fast travel and stuff like that. And it's like, it very much so, it can be restrictive. I can see it's a dual-edged sword. It creates for a very much so interesting story element that affects gameplay, but I can see how this can severely restrict a player from exploring. And kind of that's what Far Cry has kind of been about. It's an open world game. So, I mean, you know, if you want to throw in dynamic random events, that can happen. But I'm all for a more linear story driven game that has multiple choices and stuff, like a sandbox. I'm all for like closing it in a little bit more, making it more personal, you know, and making it more linear versus open. So, I mean, you know, that may be a, you know, controversial take for Far Cry fans, but for me personally, I mean, it could be interesting. I mean, like, you know, like we kind of had a lot of the same for a long ass time. So, I mean, this is a change up, and I'm glad they're kind of like listening to fans, because people have also been saying, it's like, yeah, I mean, you got this same monotonous ass like style of game making. So, I mean, this is dope though. But, you know, they also kind of mentioned, they also working on like a multiplayer focused project too as well. And the potential location for this game could be in Alaska. So, I mean, Alaska could be a new location. And that's the second game in the States. You know, typically these games, you know, happen in different countries. So, I mean, it being in the States, that could be pretty dope. So yeah. And then too, like the Far Cry, the multiplayer project, I mean, for me, I wish they used to have a Far Cry multiplayer, like a 5v5 team deathmatch type of thing, kind of like Call of Duty, which I was always kind of curious as to why. I mean, I know it didn't do that well, but I mean, you could polish it, keep putting it out. You know, I always thought like if you want to make instead of doing X Defiant and shit like that, you could just take the gunplay mechanics that you already have developed and created for Far Cry and just make a Far Cry multiplayer alongside a more linear story driven single player game. And that could flesh out Far Cry even more and give it more replayability and stuff, because Far Cry has really good gunplay mechanics, you know? And I mean, like, that whole 5v5 or 6v6 team deathmatch type of stuff, or like you can make it. I mean, if you already copying Call of Duty anyways with X Defiant, you might as well do it with Far Cry. And I think Far Cry is a better world set in it, and the gunplay, the mechanics are already there. You already have it in that world already. So I mean, like, it's just, you know, to me, I felt like Far Cry was the better option to do a team-based arena shooter versus creating X Defiant, in my opinion. But yeah, man, this is all good information. Yeah, I'm interested in Far Cry 7. Definitely, like, you know, I want to see some gameplay of this or announcement trailer or something. I need more information on this, but yeah, very, very good. Moving on though, Fable dev hires Baldur's Gate 3 producer after 4 years. Yeah, man. This is actually some good news. Ryan Clark, who was a producer for Larian Studios, is now a senior producer at Playground Games as the studio currently works on Fable. Yeah, man, they got more of information from LinkedIn. So, I mean, he's going to be working on that. This is actually pretty good because that means like you'll most like, I mean, if they allow him to kind of have a big, like, influence in some of the direction aspects of Fable, you could actually get like a nice game, man. I like the guys at Larian Studios, man. Larian Studios does great work. So, I mean, this is actually really good. He goes on to say that I'm super excited to share I'm starting a new position as senior producer at Playground Games. I mean, as far as the trailer went and stuff like that, like I like the trailer. I know some people some people didn't like the design aspects of it and stuff like that. But I mean, me personally, like it didn't hurt. I mean, granted, it wasn't that much shown. It was more so like cinematics. I want to see more gameplay, but for the most part though, man, I'm not terribly upset with it. I need to see a lot more, but I'm excited for it, man. I love Fable. Fable's always been like one of those, like, it was like a series that I grew up with as a kid, So I mean, like, and it's always been a great RPG. And I mean, to get, somebody from another great RPG to work on your RPG just makes sense, So yeah, man, I'm excited for this, but moving on though, we got some more information. So here's a game called Histera, multiplayer FPS where the maps change in real time, announced for PC. You can also play the demo at Steam Next Fest, October 9th through the 16th. Now, this game is free to play. I don't personally care for free to play games. I don't talk, that much about free to play games, to be completely honest with you. But this particular one has an interesting kind of gimmick that comes with it. So they go on to say that developer Sticky Lock has announced his new free-to-play multiplayer first-person shooter, Histera. Its unique hook is that, when they go unique hook, they're putting it nicely. That's a gimmick. Is that its maps will change unpredictably mid-match, forcing players who want to succeed to stay light on their toes. That's very much so interesting. But I can also see how it can cause issues. So they go on to say that the name of the unpredictable space-time oddity causing these map changes to Hysteria's sci-fi world is called the Glitch. And before they know it, players will be rushing through humid prehistoric jungles, jumping over modern ruins in a war-torn city, or hiding in the shadows for shadows of futuristic skyscrapers. Sticky Lock told IGN, the dynamics of the match can change at any given moment, though with an arsenal of weapons from different eras at their disposal, players have enough opportunity to prepare themselves for anything on the ever-changing battlefield. And they kind of have some screenshots here. It looks, okay. It looks pretty good, I guess. I do think it's interesting that the world changes, mid-match. My thing is the timing in which the maps change, what triggers the map to change, it depends. So like, for instance, right here, and I went through this screenshot before and I'm sitting here and I'm like, here's a scenario, right? If you're sitting here aiming at somebody shooting and then the map all of a sudden just changes, right? And before you can get your kill in, a skyscraper pops up in front of your aim. So then that can cause an issue where it's just like, bro, like you're actively stopping me from getting a kill, which could be beneficial to the person who's about to die. But, it's like, I can see how this can get frustrating. Where it's like, you could be sitting here legit trying to get a kill and then the map just changes all of a sudden. And now that person just got protected from a kill and stuff. And my thing is like, I think instead of it being so free and random, that there needs to be a trigger for it, like tied to a kill streak, tied to something, to where it's like, okay, this just doesn't happen like randomly all the time, you know what I'm saying? But it's more so like it's controlled by the other team and stuff like that. I think that could be pretty dope. I mean, having it do just random at any specific point in time or whatever, it does throw in a new element to it, to where it's like, very much so unpredictable and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, but I could see over a course of time how that can get annoying for the player. So they go on to say, and this is just more additional information, Stick-A-Lot describes Histera as a fast-paced FPS, and its maps will span the past, present, and future with weapons to match from each era, like the prehistoric hunting bow and the futuristic matchstick, described as a sci-fi shotgun that fires incendiary shells. So another question I have to ask with this is that, okay, when the map changes, so the guns change with the map then? So depending on which era that you're in, if you die and you come back to pick a different gun or a different set, the loadouts change. Is that how I'm kind of getting this? Like, if you started out in present and then the map change to the past and you die, or does the gun change when the map changes? So are there equivalents to each specific gun depending on which era that the map changed to? So for example, like if I'm running around with a futuristic shotgun and then the map changes to the past and then it goes to they call it the prehistoric hunting bow, is that the equivalent to the matchstick, which is the sci-fi shotgun? So I'm assuming when the map changes, the weapons change too. That could kind of throw in a different type of element to it, which is, that also sounds pretty interesting as well. I think the whole mechanic is interesting. For me, I don't have any faith in free-to-play games. Free-to-play games, we've seen over the past few months of just studio after studio after studio, laying off people, games shutting down within 1 year. Like, free to play is just not the way to go a lot of the times. I don't think it's the climate for it. But I wanted to talk about this because it just seems interesting and I ask some questions about it. And let me know in the comments, man, what you guys think about this particular game and the gimmick that they're trying to throw into the game. I think it's very much so interesting. But moving forward though, our last little bit of information, Hyenas. I wanted to talk about this last week, but like I said before, I was just feeling sick. But last week, though, Hyenas got canceled. I don't know how many times I've gotten emails about like, oh, you're invited to the Hyenas thing. And it's just like, I sign up to do it. And then it's like, when I work up the nerve to want to do it, I just don't feel like playing it for some reason. And it's just because it's just like, there just was no draw. There was nothing behind it. And I guess apparently this is the reason for it. So cancel looter shooter Hyenas, allegedly Sega's biggest budget game ever, but with total lack of direction. And that's kind of what I got from it. The marketing, like, I don't know, man. It just seemed like there was no interest behind it, really. There was no push. A lot of people didn't grasp to it. So YouTube channel Vololand, I'm probably butchering that, shared an eye-opening video on the recent cancellation with claims from anonymous developers detailing a lack of direction around the game, with one contributor stating many members of leadership team were asleep at the wheel, but they never seemed to lose their jobs. Oh, how nice of corporations to not fire the administration, but they'll fire the working class. It never fails. The same source noted an engine change and not committing to doing anything adventurous with the game were all part of Hyena's ultimate demise. Yeah, man, this is just unfortunate, to be completely honest with you, but I'm also not surprised because we've seen this multiple times before, man. Just, games being developed, you got incompetent people in the administration helming these projects and then run them into the ground, essentially. So I got a lot of information here. So they go on to say that Hyenas was originally planned as a premium game. It had transitioned to free-to-play game with microtransactions by the time it was unceremoniously canceled by Sega. Sega seemed to may have saved us from, or dodged a bullet, essentially, from, a piece of shit game, essentially. That's good on Sega. Cancel this shit before you put it out to market and lose more money. They go on to say that, however, its whole development process from the get-go seemed to be full of uncertainty and confusion, with one developer stating the game was watered down repeatedly, as the original idea to draw a looter shooters like Tarkov was seemingly too hardcore for a wide audience. I don't understand. This is what I mean by having incompetent people in administration and they just making foolish ass moves. It's like, you do know another big game that's coming out is going to be similar to Tarkov, probably not as hardcore, but pulling some aspects from it. Is Marathon, developed by Bungie, right? You know what I'm saying? As a matter of fact, Call of Duty has already kind of done this with DMZ, and they've made it appeal to wider audiences. Granted, they kind of ran it into the ground with the extra like, you know, content they added in there for almost like a pay to win type of scenario. But DMZ wasn't terribly received at the beginning, you know. They just, you know, Activision just kind of fucked it up at the end. So I mean, kind of same thing with Warzone 2.0. They just kind of fucked it up at the end, but it wasn't terribly received. But they go on to say that meanwhile, characters were changed from the initial ideas, while one developer who said originally they were aiming for a game with lovable rogues, the higher ups instead opted for gleeful audacity. Oh, Jesus. They wanted characters who don't this is very much so funny. They wanted characters who don't give a fuck, man, and have heaps of tude. What in the hell? Like, what kind of mindset do you have to be in a boardroom or an idea room to be able to just throw out these terms and stuff? Like, it very much so sounds like out of touch. Like, my daughter over here is telling me that this is what's in with the younger generation, and we're gonna do this, and then I'm just gonna copy some of the lingo that my daughter or my son says because they're more in tune with the younger generation, and for me to be able to translate that into actual, you know, dollars, I have to kind of like act it out myself. Like, this shit is so much like very much so a caricature and shit, and it's just like, it's so crazy. Adding that while the powers that be at Hyenas didn't use these exact words, that was the idea. The end result was unmemorable and unrecognizable characters. Okay, I was about to say, I was like, if they actually use those terms, this shit is ridiculous. Shit's funny. This was a period where it felt like we had just no idea where we were going with the tone or what needed to be done. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of glad I didn't put any time in this. They kind of go over this kind of iterates that Neil Blomkamp showed up at the studio and basically kind of like gave them an idea of what he thought about the game and tried to give them some sort of direction with it and stuff, but ultimately it just didn't fall through, didn't pan out. So they kind of go on to is like, some more developers kind of get their thoughts on it. I'll read these last little sentiments though. They go on to say that another developer continued, I had hoped that maybe after Hyenas flop, we could be kept on at the CEA if the next project was another nice low risk contract job, but most of us are likely to be made redundant, and I'm okay with that. Hey man, it ain't nothing wrong with accepting your fate. What I'm actually furious about is that the redundancies are affecting people who had nothing to do with Hyenas, like IT, operations, marketing, HR, even some people over on TW. They bear no responsibility for this bin fire. I mean, hey man, they just collateral damage. That's it. They're just collateral damage for administrators who are incompetent, who should not be in the position that they're in, and running games into the ground, and then it affects people's livelihoods. Like, I'm very much so against that type of practice and shit like that. I'm just like, man, like, if you're developing games, have people who know what they're doing in administration, who actually are like, I mean, a lot of times it's like, man, just get gamers in there. Like, people who play games actively in their older age, who work on games as well. Like, those are the type of people you want developing games, because they have an idea, they have a direction, they know what they're looking for, they know what they're doing. They're not just like winging the shit and then just going with the flow of stuff, you know. But sad news, man. But I mean, sad and good news, I guess. Like, bad that people losing their jobs, but good that they didn't, you know, put another piece of shit game into the market, you know. But that's it, basically, man. Kind of short one today. You know, let me know in the comments, man, what you guys thought about all the content and all the topics we talked about today. If you like the video, make sure you, you know, subscribe to the channel and stuff like that. Hit that notification bell if you want to never miss a video. And I will talk to you guys next week, man. Thank you.